Joe Biden's watch checking was fact-checked by USA Today, and they got it wrong. Texas' new voting law is under attack from the radical left. Plus, we'll hear from our special guest, Newsmax anchor Bob Sellers. All that and more. I'm Bobby Eberle. This is Saturday Live Stream.
And God bless the United States of America.
All right, friends, welcome to the show. Happy Saturday. I hope you had a great week. If you're new to the show, thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to start with Joe Biden, a watch, and another case of a so-called fact checker getting it wrong. As you've probably seen and heard by now, there has been a ton of criticism leveled at Joe Biden for his behavior during the dignified transfer of our fallen men and women in Afghanistan. As one of the flag-draped caskets passed by, Biden is caught on camera checking his watch. This action wasn't just noticed here, but it received attention across the world.
Up troop withdrawal from Afghanistan. He has been facing heat for playing a vital role in triggering a humanitarian crisis. He is under constant scrutiny. And now he's facing renewed criticism for checking time at an inappropriate hour. The Bidens were present at the Dover Air Force Base. They were attending a dignified ceremony of transfer of the fallen U.S. troops' bodies.
And here's the thing. This wasn't an isolated incident of Biden checking his watch once. The Gold Star families who were in attendance said that Biden was constantly checking his watch, at least 10 times or more, according to those who were present and interviewed. The topic came up in the White House press briefing as well. Here's the question.
One question on the dignified transfer, and I want to get to Afghanistan. Some of the Gold Star families have criticized the president's conduct at the dignified transfer. There was a father of one Marine who said that the president appeared to be checking his watch every time a flag-draped transfer case came out of the plane. And a sister of another Marine said that it felt like a fake and scripted apology. Was the president looking at his watch, and does he have a message to those people who felt that they were offended?
All right, let's stop there for a second. She said those families who felt that they were offended. I just hate wording like that. They were offended. They voiced their frustrations. They didn't feel like they were offended. They were. They probably still are. But when dealing with the Biden White House, most of the media just dance around trying not to offend Biden or Psaki. Here's her response.
I would say his message to all of the family members who were there, those who were not even in attendance, is that he is grateful to their sons and daughters, the sacrifice they made to the country, that he knows firsthand what it's like to lose a child, and the fact that no one can tell you anything or say anything, or there's no words that are going to fill that hole that is left by that. He's not going to speak to, and I'm not going to speak to, the private conversations. Of course, they have the right to convey whatever they would like. But I will tell you, from spending a lot of time with him over the past couple of days, that he was deeply impacted by these family members who he met just 2 days ago.
So we could hold a class on that response because she spent a lot of time not answering the question. She didn't address the watching checking at all. She didn't address the family's frustrations. She did, however, spend a lot of time talking about Biden's feelings, which again did not have anything to do with the question that was asked. But here's the deal. Despite the fact that Biden was caught on camera, and despite the fact that numerous people saw him checking his watch numerous times, USA Today put out a fact-checking piece trying to cover for Biden. And here's the story. Daniel Funk, whose Twitter bio says he is checking facts plus covering misinfo for USA Today, authored a fact check on Wednesday examining whether or not Biden actually kept checking the time on his wrist as the caskets of the fallen were rolled onto the tarmac at Dover Air Force Base last weekend, sparking outrage among the families who witnessed the distracted president. Biden did appear to check his watch during his visit to Dover Air Force Base, but he did so after the dignified transfer ceremony was over, Funk wrote. Footage leading up to the moment shows Biden with his hand over his heart for about 30 seconds as vans carry the service members' remains off the tarmac. After the vans had left, Biden closes his eyes briefly before dropping his arms and glancing down at his watch. What is that? It's completely false and obviously false. Did this guy do any actual investigation at all? Or perhaps did he see and hear the anti-Biden complaints and try to diffuse the situation by labeling what happened as partly false? Well, whatever the motivation, the reaction was intense, especially considering there were people there and they commented that Biden checked his watch over and over and over again. Here's more. Critics blasted USA Today for suggesting that the Gold Star families who alleged they saw Biden check his watch multiple times during the dignified transfer ceremony had lied. The next day, USA Today issued a corrections and clarifications. The story was updated September 2nd to note that Biden checked his watch multiple times at the dignified transfer event, including during the ceremony itself. The correction read at the top of the report on Thursday. The rating on this claim has been changed from partly false to missing context. Missing context. The only thing missing was an initial effort to get things right. Funk went on Twitter to apologize, saying he regrets the error. He also tweeted this: "It's easy to dunk on journalists when we get things wrong. I get it. To many, we're just another name on a screen. But behind the screen is a person trying to do their best." As noted in the story, that comment just fired people up even more, with some pointing out the fact that the video had been out there for days and the comments from the families had been out well before Funk published his fact check. Yes, humans make mistakes, but was it a mistake or something else that led to a pro-Biden fact check when all the actual facts pointed in a different direction? So, what do you think about media fact checkers? Let me know in the comments. All right, so next let's talk about the attacks by the left on Texas' new voting law. But first, if you're new to the show or haven't subscribed yet, regardless of platform, just search out my name, hit that subscribe button, make sure notifications are turned on. That way you can follow the show and help us grow. Okay, so next let's talk about what's going on in Texas, because it's not only the new pro-life law that has the left up in arms. Texas also passed legislation to reform the election process. And of course, the Democrats in the media are in a meltdown because ballot security and election integrity don't seem to be concepts that they are on board with. And here's the story. Liberal groups have sued several Texas officials, including Governor Greg Abbott, to block enforcement of the state's newest election law changes, claiming they disproportionately impact non-white voters. The 74-page lawsuit filed Friday in U.S. District Court in San Antonio comes only days after the measure received final passage, which was delayed more than 6 weeks by the state's elected Democrats who fled Texas in order to deny the legislature a quorum in enacting the bill. Yep, the Texas Democrats just fled. They left the state and went all over the place. Remember when a bunch of them headed to Washington, D.C.? They gave COVID to everyone. The Democrats were their own super spreaders. So, what was so bad, so draconian about this bill? Here's some of the details. Among its provisions, elections officials are prohibited from sending voters unsolicited applications to request a mail-in ballot. Harris County, which includes Houston, sent the applications last year. Any election official who does so again faces the possibility of jail time. It also bars drive-through voting and round-the-clock voting, which Harris County also permitted. There are other provisions as well, such as new voter ID requirements when voting by mail, enhanced poll watcher protections, and a ban on the distribution of mail-in ballot applications. Those on the left are going after the new law through lawsuits and claims that the new provisions are racist. SB 1 will reduce voter participation and discriminate on the basis of race, and for those reasons, it should be struck down in court, according to Nina Perales of the Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund, one of the groups that brought the suit. In addition to making voting more difficult for all voters, SB 1 is aimed directly at Latinos and Asian Americans with specific provisions that cut back on assistance to limited English proficient voters. Making voting more difficult. That's always the cry from the left. It just makes it too hard to vote. Well, as Justice Samuel Alito noted, mere inconvenience does not constitute a violation of the Voting Rights Act. In addition, if you focus on voter ID, how can that be discriminatory when everything requires an ID? The left keep pushing the COVID vaccine. yet you need an ID to get it. Does that make the vaccine racist? So, what other things can be done to make voting more secure? Let me know in the comments. All right, so next we have our special guest, Bob Sellers. Bob is an Emmy-winning journalist and anchor of American Agenda on Newsmax. He's a former anchor at CNBC and Fox News channels, and he's also the author of Forbes' Best Business Mistakes, How Today's Top Business Leaders Turn Missteps into Success. Bob, thanks so much for joining us today.
You bet. And I guarantee you, Bobby, I won't be checking my watch. Because I haven't worn a watch for years, and I'm not cool enough to wear an Apple Watch. So I assure you, I won't be looking at the clock.
All right, well, I'll keep mine hidden because I'm going to give you due attention because I'm actually really excited about this interview. And, you know, we led off with Joe Biden and kind of the media with the fact checking. But, Bob, I wanted to get your perspective of this Biden presidency so far. We can go into issue, but just an overview of you know, how it's phased you from, you know, January 20th to now.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I've been around a while, so the best I can compare it to previous presidents is during the Jimmy Carter era. And anybody that was alive at that time can tell you that the president back then, Jimmy Carter, nice man, even to this day, doing good work outside the presidency. But as a president, seemed in over his head. He was caught up in minutia. He was kind of paralyzed by the things going on around him and seemed very weak. And of course, part of that is you had the hostages over in Iran, and he wouldn't leave the White House while they were hostages. And that kind of made him another hostage. And again, showing a weakness that unfortunately, I think we're seeing in Joe Biden.
Yeah, what's interesting is that, and you see this with not just him, but other previous administrations, especially, you know, following a Republican administration, Barack Obama comes in, and they like to do this expression, two different things. America is back and repairing our standing in the world. So based on Biden foreign policy, how do you think that standing is right now?
It is, we've lost a lot. I think worldwide, we are looking very weak. The way we came out of Afghanistan, if nothing else, showed a lack of control. The fact that we got out of Bagram Air Base and we turned over patrolling around the airport to the Taliban, and then 13 people died, I think 21 injured. We're talking about American service members. And that's, you know, dozens of Afghans as well. There's so many mistakes along the way. It's like if I told you, here's how we're going to do it. Pick and choose what you want. It's like every time there was a choice made, it was the worst choice. Let's get out of Bagram and operate out of Kabul. No, no control out of Kabul. Let's guarantee that we'll get people out of Afghanistan, but they got to go through the Taliban to get there. No, don't do that. So the one decision after another has been a bad one. And the fact that we left also has China feeling pretty strong. I think if I were in Taiwan right now, I'd be worried about whether the United States would actually help them if they were attacked by China. And I think Joe Biden, as president, is counting on the world community to stand behind the United States in something like Taiwan, but I don't know that the world community is going to risk their people and their assets when we look weak and we don't look committed to what we're doing.
Oh my gosh, man, there's so much to go over with that statement. It's awesome. And what came to mind as you were saying that is Biden is turning out to be, there's a lot of things he can't say, but one of the things he's doing well, and Jen Psaki is doing it as well, is giving people a classic textbook definition of a straw man argument. You just mentioned some of the how China is looking at U.S. actions, where Joe Biden would go in one of his press conferences and saying, wow, you know, China and Russia would just love for us to be bogged down in Afghanistan. Yet that's not the argument. It's pretty much public consensus and administration consensus through the Trump administration that we were going to leave. So that is not even the argument. What China and Russia would love to see Is our standing actually hurt around the world? Allies doubting us, and you put it perfectly clearly there. What do you think? Why do you think it had taken so long? Just to get your opinion on this 20 years. You know, Biden liked to throw out the expression we're not going to fight endless wars. Well, we kind of stopped fighting that for a while. So why do you think it took so long?
Yeah, President Trump talked about didn't want to fight forever wars, and like you're saying, I think a lot of people agree with that. And you can have the argument over whether we should have left a few thousand troops over there to maintain what was there. That's a different argument. We shouldn't have been there 20 years. I think most people agree with that. Seems to me, now I've been doing this a while, so I remember talking to generals back in 2002, 2003. You may recall, Bobby, at a certain point, was it 2001? 2002, we had bin Laden trapped at Tora Bora, and then we pulled out. I've never understood exactly why we did that. And then it took us 10 years to get him. After that, it became more of a nation-building effort, and obviously, the cultures over there. I went to Iraq back in 2003. I did not go to Afghanistan, but I went to Iraq, and I did learn this. There are some cultures that are not interested in democracy. There are some cultures that are not prepared for it or appropriate for it, perhaps. And when we try to spread that around the world, we do it perhaps with good intentions, but it's not working, and we end up losing our own lives as Americans in trying to do that and putting ourselves at risk.
Right. Yeah, I was just talking the other day, and I'm not a nation builder at all, but I do believe in exporting democracy, and we do that economically and diplomatically.
Absolutely.
The so-called, blue jeans and rock and roll. You get those into countries, they're less likely to attack us. But to force democracy on these nations that aren't built for it, they're not suited for it, they're even led religiously, like in Afghanistan, they're not going to even accept it. So the one thing that frustrates me, and I'm saying, we should have been out a long time ago, but the unintended consequence of staying 20 years is this whole generation of women and girls that knew nothing but an American presence and the freedom that brought. And now the Taliban is saying, oh yeah, women and girls are going to be okay. But look at the Taliban rule before we got there, and what's it likely going to do next? I think it's just a bad situation.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking to see what is and what is going to happen to all the people there. And of course, as you mentioned, the women and children that didn't know even the mentality that the Taliban bring to this. And in my opinion, there's no doubt in my mind that now that we're gone and the longer time goes on, the more they'll revert to being the Taliban that we knew back in 2001, 2002, and so on. And the world's not going to be watching them. And they know that we're not coming back. And they know that they can go on practically uninhibited to impose what they consider their Sharia law, their version of it. And that doesn't bode well for any of the people there. And as you mentioned, especially women and children.
Hey, Bob, you mentioned back in 2003 when you were down in Iraq. What was that like on the ground? What was the reaction to you as a journalist or to the American presence in general? Because I find that fascinating. So few people were, we had our troops, we had our forces there fighting. We also had journalists covering it. What was that like?
Yeah, it was interesting. I found out when I was there, basically the dynamics of the country in which, Saddam was a Sunni. And most of the country was Shia. So when he was taken out of power, when I was over there, which was the middle of 2003, you could hear gunshots from the hotel where we stayed. You could hear gunshots going on all the time as the Shiites were taking control of Baghdad and killing the Sunnis who had been in power. So you had that dynamic going on. And you also, I did sense that they did not want us there, and that their focus, of course, is on a civilization that is focused on Islam. Now, I'm not an expert on this, but from my experience, that's what I observed. And that's why trying to build democratic institutions is such a challenge. We're brought up, Bobby, you and I may grow up having faith in God and family and country. But we understand our country is not just Christian, it's not just Jewish. You know, we make allowances for everyone. That's not the way they think over there, at least from my experience. And consequently, when you try to introduce something that is secular, that doesn't work, because first and foremost, they are focusing on their Islamic faith, and they try to build a civilization, and a government is a necessary evil to them, but they're trying to go beyond even what you and I think of the United States. They think way beyond that, in the Islam being a bigger thing in the world than Christianity or anything else, and it starts with them, and they build from that. And again, I don't want to sound like a professor, because I'm not. But I did learn that trying to impose our values on the folks over there is a big challenge.
Right. Yeah. I mean, to me, when you say that, what the visions that come to my head are with the fall of the Soviet Union, and then, you know, a decade later when George W. Bush came in, I believe he did some speeches in places like Bulgaria, Romania, where he had crowds of hundreds of thousands. And they were there because they were celebrating freedom. They wanted freedom. They wanted it. You can't, your word imposition or impose, to me, is perfect, because you can't impose that. And no one imposed freedom on the Romanians. They wanted it. They would have fought for it. This was their opening. They couldn't take on the Soviet Union themselves. But when that fell, they were ready. They knew exactly what they wanted. It's a different story in some of these other countries. I want to shift gears a little bit to the media in general, because, you know, former President Trump had a very unique relationship with the media. It might have caused some of this transition that we see today, but in any respect, we see a media that is driven more by agenda. And I just wanted to get your perspective, how you think it's changed.
As the anchor of American agenda?
Exactly, right. That's right. Which I love that.
You know, when I came up, there was supposed to be an impartiality. And as a journalist, that is ideal. And because I think you have to start everything from the facts. And that's regardless of whether you're on CNN or MSNBC or Fox or Newsmax, as I am. Any of the conversation that we have, I think, it needs to start with the facts, not conspiracies and not theories, but facts. And then you can go from there. So I think people can get enough facts in other sources. Like I've got the iPhone here, and there are news things that come across, and I can go get the news on there. So people don't necessarily need to check in the news. When I was growing up, I'd watch the evening news, still do now, in a different way. But you'd read the paper and there were only so many sources. Now it's everywhere. So what we try to do is we try to provide some sort of perspective or some sort of insight, and start with the facts, and then have the conversation that we understand our viewers feel like they may not get from CNN or MSNBC. And then the problem, I think, Bobby, is sometimes these conversations start with, like on the left, a lot of times at CNN, clearly they're going to be more pro-Biden, and they were very anti-Trump. And to be honest with you, I don't care about that so much, as long as they start with facts. The problem is they don't always uncover the facts. And then I feel like we're trying to hold everybody, responsible accountable for what they're doing. And it starts with getting what's actually going on, and then we try to have the conversation in a perspective that people maybe to the right of center can appreciate, because you're not going to hear that on MSNBC and CNN. So we try to do that in a responsible way. But again, start with the facts, but not just the facts as it was when I was growing up, where even then I didn't know how left-leaning New York Times and Washington Post were. I guess maybe I was young and liberal at the time, but the older you get, as they say, what is it, the saying, Bobby, that if you're not young and liberal, you don't have a heart, and if you're not conservative when you get older, you don't have a brain.
Exactly.
So,
right.
Something like that.
Well, right. Yeah, exactly. It's just amazing how things have changed. And with the advent of digital platforms, or in the early 2000s, around the time when you were in Iraq, I was working on not just GOP USA. That's my online news company that we've had for 20 something years. But I wanted to make a news company that's just more focused on not the opinion pieces, but and we had the hardest time breaking into Washington because they were, all focused on what's your circulation, how many full-time reporters do you have, all of this stuff. And now you've got these citizen journalists or bloggers everywhere, and they're asking questions at the White House. With the advent of digital media and that change, think that's a change for the better, worse, or where do you come down?
It's a good question. It almost doesn't matter whether I think it's good or bad. It is what's happening.
Right.
It does bother me, though, that the White House will pick and choose who they're talking to. I mean, we have Emerald Robinson quite often is left out of those pressers, and you don't see Jen Psaki or the president really ask tough questions. They get a lot of softball questions, and I think that is a problem. So as you get more so-called citizen journalists, I think that's a reflection of technology, and if they can build an audience, good for them. Again, if we're talking news, I like it to be fact-based, but I am more bothered by how this White House is certainly trying to control their message by not including those that might challenge them. And I think we see that every day when Jen Psaki's out there.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, because just think back to, former President Trump's press conferences. He's go in there and he wasn't ignored. I mean, how many altercations or interactions did he have with Jim Acosta and others? He would call on ABC, CBS, and MS and NBC and stuff, but he'd also call on Newsmax and One America News and, of course, Fox as well. Now it seems like Psaki throws something to Peter Doocy. She's regretting it, but then Emerald gets skipped over and all of these others. So on balance, it's like 7-1, 10-1 as far as the question.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's a problem. So you get more and more journalists. I don't think that's so much an issue as a less open process. And like you said, when President Trump was in office, he didn't like he didn't like Jim Acosta. I think that's pretty clear. I don't think he liked a lot of things that MSNBC and CNN were saying about him, but he took them on, and in his inimitable way, and dealt with it. And I think Joe Biden, through Jen Psaki many days, is trying to avoid that challenge.
Right. Hey, I want to ask you something about Newsmax in general. Back when I was first starting GOPUSA.com, like in 2000, in those first years, there were about, my friend and I, who we'd help fundraise for candidates because of our massive email list. There was only really about 3 organizations around that had the list that would end up reaching out to candidates and conservatives. That was Town Hall, GOPUSA, and Newsmax, the website. So Chris Ruddy and them were doing that. And then all of a sudden, you hear this thing called Newsmax TV, and you guys are going, by Newsmax now, but it's like, what is this doing? Where are they going? And then all of a sudden, just the explosion of viewership and ratings and success. I mean, did you see it coming? It's been really great. I love Newsmax, but did you guys see that coming? And what's the reaction?
Well, first of all, Chris Ruddy is the one with the vision. So he must have seen it coming, or he wouldn't have done it. We kind of did a relaunch on the network back in December of 2019, and I was part of that relaunch. We launched National Report and American Agenda, and we've added shows throughout the day. Sean Spicer has been an addition. We just recently added Eric Bowling and Greg Kelly, of course, every night. And I don't want, if I'm leaving anybody out, it's just to further the conversation. And so we kind of knew how to do this, a lot of us, because we had been at Fox before. And like Rob Schmidt, Greg Kelly, Heather Childers, who co-anchors with me, we kind of know how to do this. And so did a lot of the people behind the scenes. So to take on Fox and to take on other cable networks, this isn't completely strange to us. We've done it before, and Chris Ruddy is adding the resources to do it. And starts, by the way, it's interesting you mentioned that mailing list. Chris starts with a business model that was working on its own, as opposed to some of the other cable networks. Even when they started, they kind of had to pay to get subscribers to watch them, and then that flipped over the years. But this was a model that was already working, already had a built-in following, a built-in audience. So now, with the wider distribution of television, that's able to expand. And so, did I see this coming? Yes. This is why all of us came to Newsmax. So if it wasn't working, I'd think something's wrong. So the fact that we have seen a great increase in ratings, that's the whole reason for doing it. It's like, why do you do anything? Yes. Do you think this would happen? Yeah, this is the plan.
Right.
Now, are we ahead of schedule? Maybe. There's some, there's some peaks and valleys in the road, but generally, I think all we want to do is give a professional perspective, and again, fact-based, and give people the opportunity to tune in. And if you like what you see, we hope you keep watching. And we hope that we can respect your views and present something worth watching every day. We know there's a big pie out there watching other people, but we think we do some pretty good stuff too. And give us a chance, and you might like it.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, the production value is anything I do, I try and do, top notch. And so when I look over at Newsmax, you see the production value, the sets and the setup. It's just awesome. I enjoy being on it. But I want to wrap up with one thing, because people may not realize this, is that you were a baseball stud. And I just wanted to let people know he was drafted, I think, by the Royals, right?
Yeah.
And then had a scholarship in college. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that, but also that perspective of being an athlete and how that translated to like your business or professional life.
Yeah.
The values that put in you that have helped later on.
Well, I was born in Northern Kentucky, and I played all three sports growing up, including in high school. But I remember in Kentucky, we played Little League ball. It was called knot-hole baseball. That's what they called it there. Our sponsor was a steel plant, Interlake Steel. And we had a field right there, kind of in their backyard. And every now and then it would crank up everything inside the factory where they made steel and spew out this orangish brown smoke. And it would be so thick that we couldn't see the pitcher. So we'd have to wait a while so that we could go back to play. But I kind of grew up with that blue collar mentality, working hard, earning everything, that it's not just given to you. Then I moved to Northern Virginia when I was in 8th grade. And in Northern Virginia, played, again, the three sports, but baseball I was pretty good at. And used to hit a lot in the batting cage and hit till my blisters bled, and was drafted to play pro ball. And I went to college at the University of Virginia on a baseball scholarship, hurt my foot, and after 3 years, I couldn't play anymore. But I played 3 years in Virginia, but I had to quit playing. And even now, I've had 6 operations, so I have a hard time running and that sort of thing now. But what I learned, Bobby, in baseball that I think really helps me every day is baseball is an everyday game. And some shows, some days in life are great. It's like you hit 3 home runs or 2 home runs, and it's like you feel on top of the world. But you know what? Next day, you got to come back, do it again. And then some days you strike out 3 times. Mm-hmm. And it's hard. And life can be like that too, work and life. But you know what? Next day, you can start over again, have another day. So that's what I always loved about baseball. is the highs and lows. It's not like football, which again, I love football, but that's like once a week. Baseball, it's every day. Every day you got to come to the park. You got to give it your best. Some days are going to be good, some not so good, but every day is the chance to start and have another great one.
Man, I love that analogy. That is so good because it's like doing these shows. I mean, there's nothing better than like my show during the week's recorded Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But these live shows, you know, when you nail a live show, it's just an awesome feeling. But then you got to come back and do it again. And my first producer was my daughter. And when we first started, I had the kind of the routine going for how to make the show look great recorded. You know, you can put the graphics exactly where you want. Being live's a different thing. You got to rely on somebody else. And we did some where a guest called in from some, you know, remote hotel down in the valley. Skype's all crazy, cutting out, you know, but we learned and we got better. And then you got to come back and do it again. And I love that.
Right.
So it sounds like there was no participation medals for you. It sounded like you had to go out and
I got trophies, but I like to think I earned them. And I think that's the way it should be.
Absolutely. It definitely should. Well, Bob, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate it and definitely would love to have you back again.
Would love to. Bobby. Oh, I'm sorry, Bobby. I gotta go.
Everything was going so great until then. Make a note that he's off the list. All right, Bob. Have a great weekend. Great long weekend. I don't know if you're working Monday, but please enjoy it with your family and tell your wife I appreciate her letting you come on today.
You bet. You bet. Thanks for having me, Bobby.
All right, we'll see you later.
Okay, bye.
All right, folks, that was so much fun. That's Bob Sellers over at Newsmax, and what a great wealth of experience. I mean, he's been around. I'm glad we got to talk about his experience over in Iraq, because it's rare that, you know, someone is there on the ground watching what's going on, interacting with the folks there and the citizens of Iraq to see what is the relationship, how is the feeling, what do they think of Americans as the journalists, the servicemen and women, and it's just fascinating. Plus a little behind the scenes on Newsmax as well. So I appreciate all of you folks being here. If you have any questions for me, I'll take a little bit of time, if there are any, to go over any questions on the issues. We've had so much stuff going on. I mean, it has just been crazy with Biden, with Afghanistan, with these jobs report that just came out that Biden tried to gloss over, his going after the new Texas pro-life law. There's just so much information out there, so many issues. But in any case, I just want to go over and let you know and thank you that we've have all of this going on, all of your support, all of your super chats, everything like that. I saw a super chat earlier from Dan Wolf, and I really appreciate all of that. And everything that you guys donate to the show goes back into the show. We have computers that we're upgrading. We have the set that we're upgrading. Everything is all together, all at once. So I just want to say a special thank you to all of that, to all of you for making this show so successful. I want to give a shout out to the moderators, Steel for Real, Marjorie, LD, and a special shout out to our production team. If we can, do I have that up there to give you guys? I wanted to show you our production team. This is Mark. He's our producer. And then Sonia is off at college, so we have Allison now. That is our new intern, and she did an outstanding job today. So, folks, I'm going to wrap it up, let you enjoy the weekend. But before you go, if you're new to the show or haven't subscribed yet, regardless of platform, just search out my name, hit that subscribe button, make sure notifications are turned on. That way you can follow the show and help us grow. If you're new to the show, all right, friends, again, that's our show for today. Our next show is going to be Monday at the usual time, which is 6:30 p.m. on my channel, 8:30 p.m. on Right Side Broadcasting. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Please subscribe before you go and hit that bell so you'll be notified and give us a thumbs up. Until then, I'm Bobby Eberle. This is Saturday Live Stream. All right, friends, thanks again for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And before you go, please hit that subscribe button above. Once you do, tell your friends, share it, spread the word about the 13-minute news hour so we can keep growing. And for more great content, check out these videos right here, and I'll see you next time.